What's going on, guys? It's Brandon back here again today for another series preview, or not series preview, season preview. I just love saying series preview. Season preview, we have the Minnesota Wild up next. And when we talk about teams that are stuck, we talk about the Kings, the Leafs kind of get into that category, and Minnesota might be the ultimate definition of that. GM Bill Guerin going into year 7 as this team's GM, and I will say, remarkable job by Billy Guerin. He's managed to keep this team in the playoffs despite the cap penalties, despite the buyouts of Parise and Suter. And when teams, he had 14 to 16 million less money in cap space to deal with, and yet he still had this team in the playoffs, which is no excuse for the other 31 GMs that could not get their team into the playoffs when the Minnesota Wild were getting in the playoffs with $16 million less in cap space. Their coach is John Hynes, who's going into year 3. People questioned the hire at the time, but he's done, I think, a suitable job as the Wild head coach. Looking at the forward group, starts and ends with Kirill Kaprizov, really. $9 million until 2026, without question, this team's greatest forward, probably in its history, and probably the most electric player this team's ever had as well. You have Eriksson Ek down the middle, 5.25 until 2029, and you have Boldy, $7 million until 2030. So it's going to be about locking Kaprizov up this year. How much it's going to cost, with costs only rising, it's going to be quite a hefty price. But for Kaprizov, it's going to be hard not for it to be worth it. Because when he's hurt and he's out of the lineup, this team is a completely different team than when he's in. Then you have Marcus Johansson, who re-signed for another year, $800,000 until 2026. For what Johansson brings, that's a bargain. Marco Rossi gets the deal done, $5 million until 2028, where he will still be an RFA. So good on Bill Guerin for that. Zuccarello, $4.125 million until 2026. And Zuccarello's career kind of was rejuvenated in Minnesota. Of course, he was good in New York. He had that quick run in Dallas for the playoffs that one year. But his game elevated once he got to playing with Kaprizov and playing with Minnesota. Now that he's, I think, almost like 37, 38 years old, his production is probably going to start declining, and that's going to be a wonder how are you going to replace that presence on the right side once Zuccarello does decide to retire. Then you have Marcus Foligno, 4 years until 2028. You know what you're getting with Foligno. Ryan Hartman, kind of same thing, $4 million until 2027. That's a very physical line. Tarasenko is brought in for literally nothing from Detroit. $4.75 million until 2026. We'll see if he can get his scoring touch maybe back a little bit in Minnesota. He's not going to be counted on as a top sniper in Minnesota, so some scoring depth. We'll see if he can score more than the 10 goals he had last year, I believe he had. Then you have Trenin, which is one of the few questionable signings that Billy Guerin has had. He re-signed him at 3.5 until 2028 when he's a very similar player to Foligno. I'd say even just a little slightly worse. Not to say he's good at what he does. He's a physical guy. But for what he brings, 3.5 is a bit high, especially when they were going through cap trouble. They brought in Nico Sturm to play the fourth line center role at $2 million until 2027. Just fresh off a Stanley Cup with the Florida Panthers. Then you have Yurov, one of their young players, who's an RFA in 2028. So this team is a mix. It's got some veteran presence, but it's also got most of its forward group is still young. Eriksson Ek, Boldy, Rossi, Yurov. Those 4 guys are kind of like your core for the future. Kaprizov is going to be a big part of the future as well, although he's nearing 30. Johansson and Zuccarello are near the end of their careers. Foligno, Trenin, Tarasenko, more of the same. Hartman's kind of just smack in the middle of it. But, yeah. Other forwards, you will have to look out for Ogren. Ogren could easily find his way into the lineup. He's going to be another piece of that future. Albe Kubel is here as depth. You know what you're getting with Albe Kubel, a player I've always liked. Vinny Hinostroza provides some scoring depth. I've always liked him when he's been with Chicago, and I think he's looked best when he's in a Chicago jersey. And you have Pitlick as well. Has NHL experience. You can fill into the lineup right there. So their depth, honestly, is all right. Looking at their defense, Middleton and Faber are that top pair. Middleton kind of came out of nowhere a couple years ago, and he's earned himself an NHL roster spot and a top 2 spot on this Minnesota Wild roster, which we'll get to in a moment. 4.35 until 2029, and then Faber, 8.5 until 2033. That's your defenseman of the future, as now Spurgeon's taking a step back because he's nearing, I think, 37 years of age. You have Zeev Buium, who was drafted, I think, was it 10th overall in 2024, I think? He's an RFA in 2027. Then you have Spurgeon, 7.575 until 2027. Juracek is an RFA in 2026, and Bogosian, who you ideally want as your 7th defenseman at this point in his career, $1.25 million until 2026. And the reason Bogosian's in the lineup is because you have Jonas Brodin on IR, $6 million until 2028. Once Brodin is back, he will definitely slot in wherever need be, whether you bounce Bouillon down or whether you bounce Bogosian just out of the lineup and he takes that spot. It's a kind of a Dallas situation in Minnesota where the young players are starting to come up and play prominent roles, while so the veterans are still there and able to contribute when they can. Also defensive depth, you have Kiersted, and they signed Jack Johnson, Stanley Cup champion Jack Johnson, to a PTO. We'll see if he cracks the lineup or if another team signs him as well. Goaltending, Gustafsson and Wallstedt as Marc-Andre Fleury retires. Gustafsson, $3.75 until 2026, and then you have Wallstedt, who's finally given the reins of the backup role, $2.2 million until 2027, where he will be an RFA. Goaltending depth, they have Cal Peterson, as Cal Peterson's deal officially ended, I believe it was, this offseason. So there's depth all around here, but is it enough to get into the big dance of the playoffs? That's always the question with Minnesota. Additions, their basic additions are Tarasenko and Sturm. They really don't have any other notable additions. Subtractions, Freddie Gaudreau is traded to Seattle. John Merrill's, I believe, still in our UFA. Chisholm went to Washington, I believe. Shore, I haven't seen anything about. Nyquist, where did Nyquist sign? I remember seeing that he signed somewhere. I just don't remember where. Brazeau went to Pittsburgh, and Marc-Andre Fleury, of course, retired. So, overall, this team didn't need to make a lot of additions, and that's good because they got cap space back in return, which allowed them to make some of these additions, and they're going to have a lot of cap space next year, and that will be to pay Kirill Kaprizov. Who knows if Johansson sticks around? Who knows if Zuccarello sticks around? Bogosian, Gustafsson. So there's cap space here that this team has, which is always important. Looking at their run over the last, at this point you could say almost a decade and a half at this point. 2013 through 2018, this team makes the playoffs, and that's where 2012-13 is where they signed Parise and Suter to those 13-year deals. Everything looks up for Minnesota. They run into Chicago a couple times. They won a couple rounds in those first 3 years. They won for the first round in 2014 and 2015, and then 2016 on, they have not won a round since. Although they continued making the playoffs from 2016 to 2018, they missed in 2019. 2020 to 2023, they make all those years again. They miss in 2024. 2025, they're back in. But in total, that means in the last 10 seasons, 8 of the 10 they've lost in the first round, and 2 of the 10 they've missed the playoffs entirely, which is kind of, I think it's a record, I think I saw, that they've lost in the first round this many consecutive times. Like, even the Leafs hadn't had that much. No one talks about Minnesota compared to the Leafs because Toronto is kind of the ultimate meme. But, yeah. So 2025, their first year back in the playoffs after they missed in 2024. 45, 30, and 7, 97 points, good enough for 12th in the league. They were 4th in the division against Wildcard 1. They were the Wildcard 1 this year. They played against Pacific 1 Vegas. They took the series lead on Vegas, but they could not hold on as Vegas power passed them in 6 games. I can't see them really moving up that much if I'm looking at this roster. I just don't see enough star power here that Minnesota's missing one more superstar. They have Kaprizov, that's your one. Faber on the blue line could end up becoming that defensive superstar. Their goaltending overall is solid. Their depth is solid. They are just missing, if Boldy can take the next step, or Eriksson Ek, or Rossi, one of those guys can take that next step, 50-goal guy, 100-point guy, I think Minnesota has a chance to do something special. They're missing that special piece right now that a lot of these teams have. The Taves to your Kane, the Crosby to your Malkin, the Backstrom to your Ovechkin, the Stamkos to your Kucherov. Florida, you just got a million guys to choose from. But yeah. Anyway, guys, I want to thank you all so much for watching this video. Let me know down below, do you think Minnesota gets back to the playoffs this season? Do you think they lose in the first round again? Or do you think this team has a chance to go maybe further, as Colorado is starting to seem to fall off a bit? Winnipeg is bound to be a little worse. St. Louis and Dallas, they're up in the air. Utah might be better. So, we'll see. We'll see about this team. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching this video, and I shall see you all in the next one. Have a good one.